Luc, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Elliot, for inviting me to your podcast. I'm really excited to talk about the subject we're going to talk about. So thanks for having me.
Me too. It's a really important subject, and strangely, I don't think it gets spoken of enough in our industry. So yeah, I'm really excited. I obviously have a little bit of insight because I was involved in those very early discussions with you when you suggested starting Aerosol Alliance, and it was even there for when we discussed what the name of it should be called and all of that sort of stuff,
Yeah,
which is and then obviously I had a baby and my whole life went super crazy,
yeah.
and I wasn't able to be involved. And you've done so much since those early days and kind of really building this, doing a lot of research into the impact of spray paint and kind of understanding what the life cycle of the spray can is, and all of that. So I don't know, maybe first you just want to give a little bit of background, um, just as sort of how you got into this field of work and your background working with EcoChain and everything, just to give some
Yeah,
context.
sure. Shall I give a little bit of an extensive introduction?
You can give it as extensive as you want,
All
please.
right. So this all started, of course, when I started painting. So I've been painting since I'm 15. That's over 20 years now. And yeah, during my painting as a hobby. For me, it's a hobby. It's not a lifestyle. But I did a spraycation with a few friends, and yeah, you know how that goes. You just go visit people from abroad, and I ended up at this party whereby a girl asked me like, "Hey, Luc, you are promoting sustainability, but yeah, what do you actually think about the environmental impact of graffiti as it is sort of destroying also property, depending on where you where you paint. And did you ever consider, yeah, the environmental effects of what you're doing? And that sort of was the start of, yeah, the idea that I had or the confrontation. So that planted a seed, and that seed over time grew. So I have a background in environmental studies. I did a bachelor in Amsterdam called Science, Business and Innovation, and then did a master degree in Utrecht to do sustainable business and innovation. And during that time, I came across a multitude of techniques, scientific methods to calculate the environmental impact and sustainability of products. And the main one is life cycle assessment. And yeah, I started as an intern at a company called EcoChain. It's where I currently also work. It's an LCA software company. So what we do at EcoChain is develop software that allows businesses, manufacturers, to calculate their environmental impact using lifecycle assessment as an approach. And it allows companies to quantify their environmental impact across the full life cycle of a product. So from raw material extraction up until the point of transport to the factory gate, all the production processes that take place at a factory to manufacture a product, and up until the use phase and end of life. So how do you dispose of the product? How does it get treated afterwards? Do you bring it to landfill, or do you recycle it, or do you leave it in nature, which has a different environmental impact, of course, than recycling it? Or there's so many strategies involved, but yeah, main thing is that I learned how to quantify environmental impact based on my studies, but also my profession. And so at some point, I came across the co-founder of the Aerosol Alliance, Vincent, and he's a well-known graffiti artist as well. He's hosting a graffiti festival called Step in the Arena, and he at some point was writing names of famous people that are promoting sustainability or are trying to advocate to reduce climate change and to come up with strategies. So I think he did a piece on Greta, and I was sort of surprised, like, hey, there's somebody in the scene which I really admire in terms of style and amount of years he's been painting. And he's also becoming aware and educating himself, and he's searching for answers to questions that I also have. So you know how it goes. It's the magical world of Instagram, and I thought, like, well, let's send a DM, and well, that's sort of the birth of the conversations with Vincent. So
I
yeah,
feel
that's
like
a little bit of the
might have been
background.
that might have been how we all got in contact too, in a roundabout way, because I think at a similar time, kind of not quite in 2020, but in 2019, I also was writing extensively in early 2020 about this problem, because I sort of identified that the spray can as a product fundamentally hasn't changed a whole lot since its inception, right? And obviously there's certain kind of components that aren't in there anymore, like certain ingredients, obviously we don't have lead in our paint anymore for obvious reasons. It's rare, to have like some of the other things like xylene and other stuff like in the resins anymore. Like they are getting slightly more friendly to their user in some ways, but it seemed to me that the biggest issue was really, for me, as far as I could see, was disposal. But I guess what you found in your research was actually it was the largest footprint was really the manufacturing component of it.
Yeah. So there's so many aspects to it. So we can sort of trickle down into to the nitty gritty. So, but yeah, a large part of the environmental impact is indeed in production, and that just has to do with mass, right? So it's a physical thing that the can is made from tin-plated steel mostly, or aluminum, but in graffiti or spray paint, aluminum is like a more expensive metal, so it's mainly tin-plated steel. And yeah, it's just a container, right? So it's roughly 100 grams of container, and then there's content, which is paint. Then we have solvents, binders, propellants to get the paint out of the can, and then you of course have a valve system to sort of get the paint out of the can, and the caps, of course, too. So all these components make up our favorite product, spray paint, right? But the main impact is in retrieving raw materials. So, for example, for steel, you have to dig into the earth to extract ore, iron ore, to convert that into iron to make sheets that you roll, and then they can get formed into a container. So a large part is actually in the impact of a container, but also the paint itself. So the raw formula of paint has a significant impact. So I don't want to say percentages, but let's give an estimation. It's like 10, 20, depending on the type of brand and type of paint. There's many different types of paints, and depending on so many aspects or parameters that you can change in the composition of the product, the distribution changes. But large part, 60% is in production. And then, of course, we also use the product. So when we are making like a beautiful piece, fumes get out. Not only paint get out, but also fumes. And during applying paint on a wall, for example, the paint needs to dry. When the paint dries, it releases VOCs, so volatile organic compounds. That has to do with the solvent and the binder hardening. And that gives the effect of, paint getting stick to the wall. But then also emissions get released. And these emissions contribute roughly 30% to the environmental impact. So for the smart people who are trying to add up the numbers, 60% in production, 30% roughly in use. And then we have the end-of-life disposal, it's roughly 10%. So yeah, that's sort of the breakdown of the environmental impact of spray paint.
And like disposal to me always seems like a big issue, probably because it's kind of stark. Like, say, for example, I recall when, the Rugby World Cup happened in New Zealand and the buff started kind of like really happening at a large scale. They were really trying to clean up the city because they were worried about what sort of impression that they're going to make to tourists and so forth. That happens everywhere, whenever there's a large sporting event of global interest. And there was a sort of point in time where all of the graffiti writers in my city kind of descended on the kind of network of stormwater drains, you know,
Yeah.
and we're all down there painting and everything and just leaving the cans lying around, rusting, leaking paint into the stormwater, which is obviously leading directly to the ocean. And at some points I was walking down there with like garbage bags, just collecting them up, and there were more cans than I could possibly collect, and I just thought, geez, we've got a real problem here, and I just think for years, every graffiti spot that we ever painted on a rail corridor or whatever, like Hall of Fame spots, there's just always a mountain of cans. I even think about painting panels and not really being in a situation where I want to walk out with 6 or 8 empty cans and then chucking them in the bush, you know what I mean? But beyond that, if you do want to be like a vigilant person, you care about, recycling or disposing of things properly, that's not easy. Like, it's not immediately easy, right?
No.
And why is that? Have you found a reason why that is a problem?
I think it's to be really blunt, it's just in human nature that we are not really good in making use of the resources in an efficient way. That's really an honest ideology that I have. But also, I think there's systemic problems within our way of producing, but also disposing.
I'm just going to apologize. That's a freight train. We've got to keep it a theme, right? I actually work right on a train line, and freight will always barrel past mid-interview. It's kind of like a little cameo thing we have in every episode. It's gone now.
That's okay.
We should
You have the best view from there, right?
Yeah.
No, so I was saying that I think there's a systemic problem, and we as a society have difficulties getting rid of it. But it's how do you first of all, what's the best way of disposing any type of material that takes effort to discover and to develop technologies that are allowing, for example, not only recycling but also returning, like the extracting the raw elements that you could then reuse again. So I think it's not only, of course, with spray paint the case that it's difficult to dispose of them properly, because what is the correct way, right? So I have a little anecdote that I always share, that I was painting, and because we all paint and then we have leftover cans, right? So I took my empty cans back home. I was doing a Hall of Fame. And then, you just stockpile them. And at a certain point, I had like 30 cans. Not that much, but chucked them in a box and jumped on my bike. And I went to this recycling facility, right? And I had a conversation with the person there standing at the desk, saying like, hey, I got this box of empty cans, contains 30 cans. And I put it on the desk, and he said like, yeah, are you like a consumer or are you a professional? And I was like, this is a trick question. I'm going to say I'm a professional, of course. Yeah. And then he says, well, then you have to pay. And I'm like, what? No, then in that case, I'm a consumer. I'm just disposing my trash here neatly. And he said like, yeah, well, okay. For now, for this time, in Dutch, we would say, I see it through the fingers. But he was like, yeah, okay, I'll take them in anyway and get rid of them. But next time, be sure that you can give a proper answer, and that you reduce the amount. So there's like this unwritten limit, I don't know. And he also wasn't able to tell what's the limit of disposing an X amount of cans. And this is in the Netherlands, right? Technology is available to recycle cans. And it's super unclear for the person working at the waste facility on how to communicate with people that are bringing in, trash, basically. And this is one product, and there's so many products that end up at this recycling facility that he has to communicate like, well, this is the process. Leave it here in this bin. This is for batteries. This is for wood. This is for building debris, that sort of stuff. And it's just an example of, well, I think in Europe, we are technologically advanced, but there's so many examples throughout the world whereby the technology to recycle certain waste streams is not readily available. So depending on where you live, depending on what type of paint you use, depending on the container that it's contained in, it's super difficult to dispose of your residual paint properly. Doesn't matter if it's like a buff paint in a bucket or a spray paint can. It's just how do you dispose of it? And sometimes there's just no alternative except just throwing it in the regular waste stream, or potentially burning it or sending it to landfill. So all these elements have really a different contribution at the end to the environmental impact. So to be honest, there's also in life cycle assessment, there's no really proper way of, it will take me more time and research, but to quantify what the effect is of leaving an empty can with paint residuals in nature. Like I would have to do like a scientific study, and preferably would have somebody with a PhD research that topic. Well, I can't do that based on the amount of time and effort that it takes, but that would be really nice to have. But it just shows like how complex this is.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess like from a industrial design standpoint, like once you have a multi kind of material, multi-component thing, it becomes infinitely harder to just recycle it because there has to be dismantled physically and separated. Then you've got flammable gas, but you have a solution, an idea for that part of it, right? I sort of remember.
Yeah. So there's again, I don't want to promote any brands, but I do want to promote this guy. It's I think it's his name. I'll look it up to be sure. Daniel Kem from Münster, Germany. He developed the can opener. It's called Open Can. And it's actually really easy to apply. So I have a spray paint here, and you just put it on the lid, and then you can insert the can opener, and you can puncture a hole in the can. As you can see, it leaves out the paint will get propelled out quite fast, depending on how big the hole and where you puncture the can. But it's really efficient to get all the residual paint out. And the best thing is that it's safer to transport for any type of person that is picking up cans. So this is way easier to recycle for recyclers. Also, the people who come up and pick up trash and waste at residuals. So I think that's it's a nice innovation, and I think it's also like this grassroots bottom-up initiative from Daniel that he was like fed up with puncturing a can with probably a screwdriver with potential.
Well, back in the day, it was on the rail spike, like the little bolts on the train tracks. So it's just a quick pop, but it was a bit of a knack to it, and it wasn't as sort of ergonomic as that, which seems like such an obvious innovation, but that's so great that you put that out there into the world.
So if you want to paint even safer than you're currently doing, check it out, Open Can, from Daniel Kem in Münster, Germany. And I think it's a nice example of people that are trying to help with solving a magnitude of problems, but just contributing to one solution in the right direction. And I think it facilitates better recycling. So it's definitely a good development. And I also just like the fact that it's coming from individuals within our own scene, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I had come up with some really convoluted ways that maybe we could tackle this problem. I mean, from my sort of viewpoint, I felt like we needed to kind of limit the amount of cans that were being manufactured and disposed of. And it seemed to me that the only way that could really work, and, I think people in Europe are very familiar with this concept. People in New Zealand and Australia certainly are. It might be a little more foreign these days to people in places like the United States, which is it is a very wasteful kind of culture out here. But, we grew up with the the milk bottles that were reused, that we put out every night with the milk money, or the swapper crates of beer, which is probably like even better example, where you take your empties in a crate, and you take them there, and they already have like washed and refilled ones for you to take back away. In Europe, it's like the sparkling water, like everybody, gets their sparkling water for their dinner table and everything, and they put them out, and you're paying a small fee in the beginning for an outlay of money for the original product, but you're also technically getting a cheaper a slight refund or a slight discount every time you recycle to encourage the recycling. And but that seems to me like something that would kind of entail a total reinvention of the whole manufacturing, distribution, and retail model as we know it, which is kind of like how do you even go about implementing that massive a change?
I have another really practical example. We in the Netherlands just implemented a deposit on soda cans. I can tell you the implementation of that is dramatic, and that has to do with the fact that if you have a beer bottle, for example, that you have a deposit on, it is open and it's easier to empty. But if you look at like a regular soda can, to empty it, you really have to put in effort, and people don't do that. So right now at the recycling, or how did I say that, the collection point, it's mainly in supermarkets. You have places where you can insert your empty soda cans and to be recycled. But it's from the government. It's like this top-down approach. Like, we're going to implement this deposit system, and supermarkets are going to help facilitate collecting them, and it's going to be super nice and smooth transition. Well, it's not the case. It gets super dirty, and I think it's similar to paint. I think the chances of success are really slim. I am a big fan of trying it out, but as you just mentioned, it really takes you would have to redesign the entire supply chain, basically, or at least the end of the supply chain.
You would, because the way I kind of envision it, it's like I said, it's convoluted. So, like, bear with me for a second. But I had this whole idea, because obviously refillable spray cans exist, right? Like, you have the U-can and other kind of products that people are using. Like, that doesn't have to be reinvented. But what I could see was that the retailer would have to, similar to like when you go to like a store that sells house paint, they have all the product, the base and everything all kind of contained, and then they add color, and seal it and package it and give it to you. I feel like the retailer has to become more of a manufacturer, or pick up like X amount of that kind of manufacturing responsibility. And essentially, they would have a surplus of like X amount of cans, that are made, like containers, a machine to kind of fill and pressurize and seal them, right? And a cleaning facility, which, so the graffiti shop, would completely change into this new thing, right? And, they could kind of like get a sense, according to which colors are moving quicker and everything, what they need to restock and hold a surplus, similar to the liquor store does with the refillable beer bottles. And then you could literally just come from a kind of consumer viewpoint with your empties, hand them in, which would be kind of clean, and then you'll be paying like a slightly discounted price to take that product away, but you'd be encouraged to always kind of bring them back. I told a lot of people this idea. I wrote about it. I said I think it takes. I don't think by any means it was a perfect idea, but I wanted to throw that out there as a sort of a conversation starter, because it seemed like there was potential there.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of potential in that idea. It's and for me, from my perspective, before trying to redesign that, I would love to make a lot of assumptions, because how would that work? Just let's in an ideal world, let's say that this would be possible. Well, what would then the benefit be if we look at it from an environmental perspective? So I could do the calculation. But again, I'm limited in time, so I'm trying to sort of also prioritize based on, okay, what's available in data, and it's super hard to do this calculation because you would have to make so many assumptions. And I think if I just look at regular take-back systems for any household product, there's definitely a benefit. So I think there is the potential to like save emissions and related climate effects, but it's super difficult to now say, well, I think it's a super good idea because it will reduce global warming with 20%. I just don't know. But I think what would really help is to have have a bunch of people just sort of do like a little hackathon. It's just an idea to discover, well, what's the potential upside of this, like not only from an environmental perspective but also from a business perspective. So this would require to also have a retailer there, have a manufacturer there, because I think, and that's also sort of the mission from the Aerosol Alliance, it's we have to collaborate, right? There has to be a cross-functional team effort to say, like, hey, I'm a manufacturer, I have capital, and of course I also want to earn a little buck. So let's see, how can you make it profitable on a small scale? The retailer also wants to just provide nice products for a consumer, and I think in the end, artists or users of the product of spray paint are also interested into not doing more harm than necessary. So I think everybody has like this, it could be a win-win-win situation, right? But in essence, you would need to have parties trying to collaborate and solve that issue. So the problem to tackle is the amount of waste being generated. We want to reduce it. What are potential solutions to reduce that waste problem? And hopefully you can then work out work out this idea that you have in more detail, and then see, does it make sense? Because in the end, also for people to change, there would, first of all, there's always resistance to change, but you have to convince people that there's a benefit, and being able to quantify those benefits in terms of financial benefits, but also definitely, and that's the goal that we are having, of course, reducing the environmental impact and maybe also social impact, would be nice to sort of help convey others to make that change, to then try to tackle that issue and to work on that idea that you have. So that's my view on it.
I mean, I think the hard thing is that I think that graffiti writers are by no means a monolith, right? As a community, there are definitely a lot of people who are conscious about the environmental impact of what we're doing and would love to see change. I think that there's definitely a large contingent of people that probably don't care or don't think about it. There's definitely those people who are more engaged in the kind of type of activities where, as I said, you might be painting a panel or a spot where you need to like ditch your paint super quick, and who are kind of making these choices on the fly, kind of out of just, the necessity of not basically carrying evidence on themselves and stuff, but for someone, such as myself, who has kind of arrived at a point in my life where I'm much more on the artistically inclined end of things, where I'm very focused on trying to paint elevated work and take my time. I mean, I've wrestled with this, and the funniest thing is where I've wound up is I'm just using a lot less spray paint. Like, seriously, I mean, and finding that there are so many much more sustainable places to even source my acrylic paint. For example, here in the city of Portland, in Oregon, where I live, there's a really amazing household paint recycling system, and then they retail the recycled paint. It's an amazing product. It smells a little funky. I don't know what they do in the process that kind of gives it that particular odor, but it's a fantastic
odor, right?
Yeah, Paint. I mean, who knows where some of this paint comes from, but their way of kind of refining it and turning it back into something else, and often at a fraction of the price that it originally retailed for as well, which is amazing. So I've been really favoring that. I've been, looking, and when I opened up on my blog, many years ago, and we started getting feedback from people such as yourselves. Gory, was one person that spoke up a lot about, look, I've always used a ton of latex or acrylic paint and the most minute amount of spray paint I can, just knowing that it's such a wasteful product, So It does seem like that's also something people need to think about, is that just using a lot less spray paint and being more considered in kind of how you balance up, like, your use of spray paint versus acrylic, which is obviously easier to kind of use in its entirety and dispose of. And most responsible paint companies do have a recycling system of their own where they take back their packaging and clean out and recycle the excess paint. So,
yeah, I think you just hit the hammer, or the nail on the hammer, I guess.
Nail on the head, they say.
The nail on the head, yeah. So no, I think it's one of the strategies, one of the best strategies in my opinion, is try to, not completely avoid using spray paint, but to see, well, do I have alternatives? And yes, there are alternatives. It's using regular wall paint or buff paint. Don't know how everybody calls it, but it's different in every country.
Yes.
Regular wall paint, which is latex paint, it's water-based. So by default, it has significantly less VOC emissions because the solvent is water. And that really helps eliminating the impact that occurs during the use phase. So that's already a really good effort. Even if you're buying it like virgin, so meaning new from the store, you would significantly reduce your environmental impact of the artwork that you're creating, because it's also a matter of efficiency. You can just cover more surface area with regular wall paint. You use your brush or your roller. Nowadays, you also have a lot of spray painting options with either like an Askew, like a generator, or like the spray guns.
The Graco, even they have handheld battery-powered ones that, like, similar to a power drill. They have like ones that you strap on your back, so that they're a little more ergonomic and less kind of strenuous on your forearm. So there's definitely a ton of options.
Yeah, and so I think I'm trying to look up an artist that is mainly using, or only is using brush paint and is making sick pieces, but he's standing in between all these graffiti artists, but he's been only using hand paint. And I'm like, and his style is amazing, but I'll look that up later. Anyway, I think one of the best strategies is indeed to try to think of, as an artist, like, hey, how can I try to limit the use of spray paint? And there's also, of course, the option to use water-based paint. There's so many. There's a few graffiti spray paint brands that now offer water-based paint, and they're developing that and improving that. And I've heard from many people that, it's just different in terms of quality. I have to wait until the paint dries, and I totally get that. That's okay, and it's just getting acquainted with a new type of new way of painting. And I think also, as an artist, we sort of have not the responsibility, but the curiosity to discover new materials, right? So you have different medias that you can use, but there's also different types of paint that you can use. And the more that you explore and the more comfortable you get with using that product, the more sort of I think you would be able to broaden your spectrum of tools that you can use, right? So I think it also, on an artistic side, has value to explore using water-based paint. And then to get to your other point, is buying second-hand paint, or this option of paint that is disposed of and then actually remixed into like a second-hand paint. It's a super good strategy, and we just promoted that in a piece of content that we created on our Instagram page. So 4 tips that we have is, wait, I'm just going to read it up. Dispose of your spray cans appropriately. So that's taking it back to a recycling facility if that's not available, disposing them of in a trash bin. So in Europe, yellow trash containers, specifically designed for metal containers. Be sure to puncture them to do that, and then otherwise, just in regular household waste. So that's tip one. Tip two is use bucket or latex paint, just what we just discussed. Use secondhand paint, also nice. Sometimes I buy a batch of paint, spray paint or regular paint. You have these platforms where you can buy secondhand stuff from other individuals, and there's people that have like boxes of spray paint that they just don't use and will never use, and it's just in their shed. And I think, of course, you can then decide to dispose of it, or you can actually make cool artwork for a really cheap price. And then the other last option is try water-based paint. So 4 tips for people that want to make a conscious decision and want to reduce their environmental impact of the art that they are creating. Yeah.
You know, what's really interesting too is just the actual economy of working with acrylic paint from a bucket. Like, for example, on some of my larger mural projects, and I have to give credit to Sena and Bez from Etam Crew from Poland, because they weren't like necessarily the first people I seen doing this, but they were first people that kind of explained it pretty clearly, what they were doing during their mixing process. But they worked with a process of like kind of like more or less CMYK, I guess. Like they got those color values and then hand mixed everything. I've kind of opted more towards like working with primaries and black and white, and then that way you can limit the kind of the purchase of specific mixed or tinted colors, like spot colors, like to kind of use a printing kind of terminology, the ones that you can't achieve easily by hand mixing. But you'd be amazed at how much you can achieve just with your primary colors, black and white. A lot of times you don't even need the black and white to achieve a ton of colors, which is phenomenal. It takes a little bit more time in the prep. Sometimes I work wet on wet, so I literally will have a palette and I will be adding quantities of paint there, blending to get the color and painting right on the spot, so that I'm not pre-mixing into multiple plastic containers. It takes a little longer. Sometimes it's not great if you're working with a team, but it can be really efficient. And I've come off really large mural projects having not even used 5 gallons of paint for the entire project. I still have paint to take back to the studio and work on my own stuff and use for other things, so.
Yeah, I get it. So it's not only like an environmental thing; it's also an economical thing, right? To try that approach. I think it's really I see, people who are doing large scale murals will at some point have to come up with like, hey, okay, I'm trying to do this, 100 square meter wall, and I have a client and they don't have a large budget. So how can I paint economically for my customer, but also at the same time make nice artwork? And then it goes sort of, I think you get forced into being creative with what type of paint you use at some point. But yeah, it's super cool that you were able to do that. I wouldn't be able to do that to like wet mix paint on the fly, but I think that shows like, as an artist, you develop strategies to achieve a certain results, and you have this image in your head, like I want to create this, and then how do you get to that point, right? So you can use spray paint. Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing, how specific I can get. I have been on projects where I have needed very particular colors, and there's actually apps out there where you can like take like sample from the hex value, of a color, and it will tell you a breakdown of like primary colors and percentages. And then if you really, you can take a scale and you can weigh those out, or a measuring cup and measure those out, and you can mix together very specific colors that way. It takes a little bit more time on the beginning, but the other thing is spray paint is just not a durable product for murals. It breaks down very quickly. It's a very thin amount of paint, and as you say, with those hardeners and the solvents in them, like sometimes they they do very weird things, when they're like baking on a surface in sunlight and everything. Things with organic pigments, particularly organic red pigments, tend to break down really, really quick. It's why like purples, reds, pinks tend to fade very, very quickly to, like, so, there's a lot of sense in also switching it up and working with acrylic paint just beyond, these other things we've discussed.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Also, that sometimes there's so much science behind this. So it's the type of surface area that you're trying to cover. Is it? I think that the word in English is it has pores. So pores. I know the Dutch word, but it's
porous. Yeah.
So depending on the type of wall, if you have like a really solid concrete wall, it's easier to apply latex paint. But if you have a really a wall that sucks up the paint really hard, then you would have to apply a different type of paint, and then you would probably use more paint also. So there's also a strategy in preparing the wall before doing your mural, like cleaning it, you're applying this the filler basically.
Like a sealer, like primer. Yep.
And then that's before you start working. Then you have the type of the strategies that you just mentioned, like making your own paint and mixing them into a specific color scheme. And then there's, of course, also protecting the wall that you just created, protecting the artwork. And that's with the use of coatings. And I've had on, I think it was All Caps Mural Festival, there was this chat between specialist, a person who was actually a coater by profession, and also he cleans walls, but he was talking a lot about coatings, and the coatings also react with the paint that you just applied. So you have to be really careful with what type of coating you use. And then there's this different effect, because the paint that you just use, they might turn out with or get a different color because of the coating that you're applying. So there's so many elements that you can think of, and sometimes people just do it and they don't think of it, and some people are really knowledgeable about it, and I think that's also part of why we're having this dialogue, right? Is to share that knowledge with one another. Like how do you best
and so a big part of what we all agreed to do early on when we were talking about Aerosol Alliance and kind of its mission, was to create a manifesto. And then that manifesto was really kind of aimed from us, the artists. Here comes my train friend again.
I hear
it. I'll tell you what, the loudest ones are the Amtrak trains, because they just go like crazy.
They know you're recording a podcast.
I know. I like it. I thought about going to like a quieter place to record it, but I love how authentic we keep it on this podcast. Like the sound of the freight trains rolling past. It's very, I don't know. It feels right.
I get it. It's you're not on the wrong side of the track, so to say.
Yeah. Exactly. So, as I was saying, like a big part of it was a manifesto that comes from the point of view of us, the artists, the people that really love and enjoy using this product, reaching out and really trying to apply some pressure to the spray paint manufacturers. Now, people have to understand, of course, there are a lot of graffiti specific products out there in the world. Since the 90s, at least, Europe, a lot of European companies, pivoted that way. But a lot of them are subsidiaries of much larger paint companies whose aerosol offerings are kind of way beyond, this is probably a very niche part of their business, like truthfully. So, I'm sure that the interactions that you've had and responses that you've had in reaching out to these paint manufacturers has been varied, in the sense that sometimes you are dealing with a company started by graffiti writers who care very much about this and are very hands-on, and sometimes you're dealing with a really big, like a Motip Dupli or someone who are just massive, So how has that experience been? Have people been responsive? You don't have to name names, but just, what's the general vibe check?
Yeah, indeed. So I have been talking to manufacturers, mainly in Europe, but also outside of Europe. That still leaves the entire world out there. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, no. To answer your question, yeah, they have been open, and I had together with the team of volunteers had discussions with manufacturers, and it really depends on how far they are in their sustainability journey. So indeed, the manufacturers that have sort of started out with graffiti artists developing their own paint have been very welcoming, and I really appreciate that. And then, yeah, it's difficult because it's also I want to achieve a certain thing. I want to be able to help them out with calculating their environmental impact, but they might have different things at hand, challenges that they sort of face, and um, it's difficult to overcome all these challenges. So there has to be room for this type of sort of sustainability endeavor, right? So I think most manufacturers are willing, definitely, to do good, but they are also faced with, for example, availability of raw materials. I've heard several manufacturers that, I'm just these are just examples, so they're not based on actual things. But for example, availability of a raw material like titanium dioxide, which is the pigment that makes up white. There's that could be due to all these type of things that are happening in the world. For example, we have Corona, and then there's like a huge price increase of fuels, so that also sort of limits the availability because of just a container shipping a container from China to Europe, or from, I don't know, South America to North America or whatever, is just more costly. So they are limited in availability of just really raw resources to make a product. And then do you have also the knowledge and skills in-house to, if you want to, for example, make water-based paint, you really have to change your formulas. And there's an example in the graffiti spray paint industry that they are working on water-based paint, but they also have a high quality standard. So before launching water-based line, they really want to ensure that the quality that they are known for is the same. And in all honesty, I think that's a mission impossible, because it's just a different product. So you cannot set the bar for acrylic paint on the same, cannot put it on the same level as water-based paint, because it's just a different product. It's Dutch we would say comparing apples to pears. And I think there are so many challenges that we as artists do not understand from the perspective of the manufacturer. Like, for example, having a steady output of production, making X thousand units a day, it's just a KPI that they have to meet. So it's really difficult for people to grasp their challenges, and I think that's why the Aerosol Alliance is also there, is to share that insights. I know I have been at 2 congresses in Europe where the global aerosol industry comes together, and two years in a row, the key topic is sustainability. There are a lot of people out there just with good intentions developing innovations. Like, for example, there's this cap manufacturer that we all know. It's there. They just hired a global sustainability manager to tackle those issues. Like, okay, how do we make sure that we, I think they're even stock listed, but they're a big company. In Europe, there's upcoming legislation. It's called CSRD. It's super important for these big manufacturing companies to comply to that regulation, and to be able to report their their sustainability initiatives, and also to demonstrate that they are reducing emissions over time. So I think it's easy to say, yeah, but the manufacturers have to do X, Y, Z and point fingers, but that's the easy thing. It's, I think, having the dialogue, having a good understanding, also seeing where can we help out. And I think that's it's a difficult how do you say that? interface, because if if you ask me, I think the manufacturers are really not the graffiti spray paint brands that started bottom up, but like the bigger manufacturers are really far away from having a dialogue with the users of their products. Because as you mentioned earlier on, like not every like big brand that makes spray paint is making that for the application of graffiti, or it's just one of the lines that they have. They're making spray paint and other types of aerosol products for different purposes. So they have like 80% is focused on cosmetics, for example, or whatever, air fresheners, that sort of examples. They're also aerosol products, but making paint is not primary business of every manufacturer out there. But key point I'm trying to make is that there's a lot of people out there working their asses off, doing research, developing new products, new innovations, and at some point they will be in our hands without us even knowing it. For example, this is just a regular spray paint can. I won't turn the thing, not to promote any products again, but at some point this steel will have a lower impact because some people in probably Germany made a plant to manufacture steel using hydrogen instead of gas. It's quite an exciting development, and you will not see it on the outside of the container of the product that you're using, but it has a lower environmental impact. So these are developments that I think they could benefit from sharing to a broader audience on how much effort and work they are putting in and opening that dialogue. I would love to have a manufacturer sitting in your podcast explaining what those challenges are. It's like
maybe that's a good suggestion for another episode. I'd certainly love to put the invitation out there, and maybe we could talk to a few different manufacturers who manufacture at different tiers or levels, just to kind of talk about what those what some of those hurdles are for them and challenges that they face.
Yeah, and to sort of end the point, so I've come across so many interesting individuals and people that are willing to help out, and I think the general mindset is that people don't want to do harm; they want to do good, and they are willing to cooperate. It's just asking the right questions and finding the right time, and also sometimes finding a little budget to do something. Yeah, it's. I think I'm trying to be optimistic. I think a lot of manufacturers will, one way or another, develop innovative solutions that will reduce the environmental impact of spray paint. And it's also giving them the opportunity to do so, helping them out in the sharing knowledge on how I'm using wall paint instead of spray paint. Maybe they can develop a wall paint line with even better formulas, for your purpose. So it's just a way of looking at who is your consumer? Do you understand their problems, and can you develop products that help solve those problems? Right?
Yeah, I like that point of view very much. I think that the kind of more holistic kind of viewpoint is always better. I think that in society, some of our problems have gotten so large, especially around a lot of the kind of environmental and sustainability kind of issues that we face and challenges, that there's a lot of us kind of talking about, people absolving themselves of blame, people like, the big manufacturers are talking all about how it's all personal responsibility and we all have to play our part, but they're the ones who are responsible. But it seems to me that we all play a part, as you say, and that it seems like communication and education is what's kind of been missing, which is missing in a lot of our sciences as well, like adequately, relaying and explaining information to people, at all parts of this in a way that they can digest and understand it.
Yeah, and for example, one thing that I would like to achieve with the Aerosol Alliance is to I want to nudge branch organizations within the aerosol industry to develop a label. A labeling system is, I think, quite easy to develop. there's many examples of labels that work, and it's a scale from A to E. So A being good, E being bad, and you just have to define in which brackets, what are the sort of the threshold values to be able to be labeled an A type of product or E or anything in between. I think that would be really helpful in educating consumers to say, hey, I have brand X here, I have brand Y here, and I have brand C here. I want to make a conscious decision. Provide me information which enables me to make that conscious decision. And I think that's one of the goals of the Aerosol Alliance, is to provide information, provide insights. But it involves doing research. It also involves having a lot of dialogues with people. And one of the goals for me would be to develop a labeling system, not maybe myself, but in collaboration with other parties. And that's just one of the things that I would like to accomplish. But main goal is to, as a scene, so including manufacturers, including recyclers, including artists, retailers, see what are the options that we have available and what options make sense. What is low hanging fruit, and what are the things that will take time, will take significant investments to develop better solutions. For example, there's so many things, Elliot. I've seen I think it's a binder or propellant that's being developed. It's dimethyl ether, DME. It's there's so many ways of producing that. I think propellant, and there are so many options to sort of get into a green route chemically of producing it. And there's companies that are working on that. It's super complex, but they are doing it. And it's at some point will end up in one of these products that we're using, but we will never know unless you are going to read the ingredient list really carefully, which is, by the way, also really small.
You know, I've been fortunate to do some testing before, some like kind of blind testing of like spray paint products at Mozart Dupli many years ago on one of my trips out to Europe. And I went there to Husmersheim, I think is the small city where, a village where the manufacturer is. And, we got all these boxes of white that were unlabeled, but they knew what they were from the code, the serial number on the bottom. And, it was quite interesting to go there as a very naive 27-year-old kind of with no concept of kind of how much work goes into the development process and how seriously they take it. And I will never forget, I must have made some remark about, like some kind of snide remark about the quality of the product at that time, in my opinion. And one of the scientists, he said to me, do you honestly think that we want to do this? We want to put substandard product out there, like that we're doing this on purpose? He's like, look at this. It's like a giant lab. You know what I mean? Like it's a serious lab. They're all in lab coats. Like the actual scientists, it's like they are looking at, through us testing and kind of writing these kind of more anecdotal kind of reviews based on our user experience. I mean, they're going away from that, making like a very, very educated decision on like, wow, this one worked better, because we had changed this configuration ever so slightly. I mean, it was a wake up call for me.
Yeah, but this example is what I'm trying to say. These are individuals that have a background in chemistry, and they are really knowledgeable. They did like 4 years of bachelor, 2 years of uni, then a PhD, another 4 years. That's 10 years of studying. And they are trying to, really optimize their formula for our sake, right? For being having the availability of a yellow that actually covers well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many times in the past have you used a yellow that doesn't cover? You have to spray it 2 times. It's crazy. But then some of them are able to nail it because they have brilliant scientists in their lab. And I also had the opportunity to visit a factory in the Netherlands. I'm just going to share the brand because I collaborated with them. It's called European Aerosol. It was actually an initiative from their branch organization called the Dutch Aerosol Association, and they asked EcoChain, "Hey, we want to do this lifecycle assessment of different types of aerosol industry aerosol products, so air refreshener, paint, and like a cosmetic use, the deodorant." And they opened up, their facility. We were able to walk around, and I was able to inspect and see the production process of filling cans. And Elliot, I can tell you, it's like seeing a child being born. It's like this moment at the moment that the paint is inserted into this product, and then the cap it's getting pressurized. It's like there's so many components coming together, and we buy it for €4 a can. I think it's expensive, but at the same time also cheap. And the amount of expertise that's sort of contained in an aerosol aerosol product, specifically graffiti paint, it's insane. I get super excited. I hope you can tell, but it's crazy. That's why I'm really enjoying what I'm doing, because it's just an amazing type of product that's being developed, and it's been there for over 50 years. But as you just said, like the product really didn't change that much. But believe me, I think it will change in the next decade in such a way that we'll not be able to see it, but like it will not be the same product as we used to know it. And I'm really excited for that future. Like what will graffiti spray paint look like in 10 years?
Yeah, I'm excited. So your website, it's aerosolalliance.com, correct?
Yeah.
And what would you encourage people to do? To get on there, to educate themselves, to maybe sign the manifesto to show support?
I think there's a few things that you can do. There's a lot of information available on the website. We will change the website probably this year a little bit, but I think the content will, to a large extent, remain the same. I would really hope that artists can make the effort to sign the manifesto. It's also nice because to a large extent you wrote it. So and we did it collectively, right? But
we did. It was a very collective effort.
But I think you also did a voiceover for it, and it's it's really we can still do that. But I really like that we have that manifesto. For now, we have had it live for over a year. There's 200 signups. What would be really great if we could double that amount? That would be nice. Because I will use it as a sort of leverage, not to sort of pressurize manufacturers, but just to show like there is a considerable amount of artists globally, and I've already used that in a proposal. It just helps to show that there's just a demand for it, for greener products, for better products, that there's actually artists that are interested in having alternatives. That's the thing.
100%.
Yeah. And then last but not least, it's for me difficult to ask, but I will ask it, to do more research, to create better content. It would really help to submit a donation. We have a donation option on our website available underneath the support us. And it's basically all of our work is voluntarily. We are a non-profit, but it really helps to stimulate our research. Maybe attract new volunteers, also to maybe hire an intern to do additional research. For example, working out on your idea of a take-back system, that would be really something that could be like a master study in environmental science to discover what kind of benefit does that have? Does it even have a benefit? Being able to quantify that and work that out would be really great. So those are options to support us. And I think last but not least, we are mainly on Instagram because graffiti scene is mainly active on Instagram. and just people sharing content is great. For example, we had Sophos sharing one of our first posts. We got sort of a viral status, and yeah, I think so many artists are already sharing and commenting on our posts, and it's great to have that feedback. But I think also opening up that dialogue together with your peers, like the friends that you're painting with, maybe also your kids that are trying to explore painting, like maybe you can show them, well, there's actually some alternatives. I think my invitation would be to invite artists to educate themselves, but also to educate others. Yeah.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, man. I know it's late in the evening there now, so
okay.
No, it's really good to catch you. Really good to get this out here. It's a little bit of a different discussion, I think, than like the other episodes of this podcast, but it's extremely vital and really relevant. So much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elliot, for inviting me and enabling me to sort of share my story. I really enjoyed being on your podcast, and I like to talk, so this sort of setup is really good for me. But I hope people walk away with a new knowledge and new ideas to make even better artwork, but with less environmental impact.